Did you have cases that you didn't like to work versus cases that you did like to work?
No. My sense of justice when something goes wrong, something is wrong, or somebody's, done something they shouldn't do, it doesn't. I'm not. There's not one case I like over another. I mean, they're all challenges, and I always see the finish line. I don't particularly. The glass is always half full or refillable. I never sort of despair about it or say, no, I'm not involved. I'm not getting involved with this.
Okay, so for the audience, very excited today. One of the reasons for my channel is to figure out why people go into law enforcement. And I have a very unique experience here of, I'm actually in Dublin, Ireland right now. So I have the ability to talk with a former Garda police officer, law enforcement personnel person. We're going to delve into, I'm obviously going to ask him a lot of the same questions that I do the US law enforcement people. But again, I want to figure out why people in Ireland go into law enforcement as well. So with that being said, can you please introduce yourself for me?
Hi, my name is Frank Kenahan.
And Frank, can you give me a little bit of a background about yourself? For example, where did you work?
Well, I'm worked in Dublin ostensibly, mainly in the south of Dublin, in Dunleary, Cabinteely, Dundrum. I did a spell in Limerick, which is on the west coast of Ireland, but most of my policing was done on the east coast, and then in the city in Rathmines. And I also did a spell in County Wicklow, based in Bray, but I ended up working for the Dublin Metropolitan Region headquarters in Harcourt Square as the Regional Detective Superintendent for Dublin City.
Okay. And what year did you start?
I started the Guards in 1982, and I trained in Templemore, which is the Garda Training College. It was the training centre then, for 6 months, and I was stationed then in Dundrum. That was my first station, Dundrum. It's in South County Dublin, or Southeast County Dublin, yeah.
Okay. So before I ask you about your training, when did you retire?
I retired in November 2 years ago.
Okay. So tell me a little bit about training for the Garda. Hopefully I'm pronouncing it right. Garda?
Garda, yeah.
Okay. Tell me a little bit about training for the Garda. When you begin, how long is it and what does your training entail?
Okay, well, the Garda training has been totally revamped since I started in 1982 when I went down to Templemore. It was 6 months of intensive training, traffic management duties, police law, learning all about the laws and enforcement. And the idea was that you are given the theory for 6 months, and then you go out to a station and you try and apply that theory, put it into practice. And I suppose a lot of the senior guys, when I came out first, would say, never mind all that stuff you learned in Templemore, we'll show you how to do it. So we were blessed really that we had mentors who took us on and showed us the ropes and brought us along until we were able to paddle our own canoes.
So in the United States, we have most officers, police officers have what's called a field training officers. And you're basically assigned to a senior officer for a specific amount of time. Do you guys have the same type of program?
We do now. We have tutor guards now, and the training is for 2 years. And it's far more comprehensive training nowadays. I don't know that much about it. I did my 6 months. I suppose I should say what was supposed to happen was that after the 6 months in the field, I was supposed to go back to the Garda Training College, complete an examination once you hit the ground the first day back in there. And of course, I wasn't looking forward to that, but as luck would have it, we were very busy in Dundrum, and for one reason or another, our district officer didn't send us back. He made some excuse that he did need us. I mean, there were 6 of us came out on the one day, and I suppose to lose 6 from between 2 stations was a considerable amount of personnel to lose when you consider people going on leave and people who are maybe are sick or whatever it is. You know, it's hard to backfill 6, I suppose. So we were lucky that I didn't have to go back down.
Mm. So give me a little bit of background about how Garda is broken down in terms of, so that's a national police force. So for the audience, in the United States, we have sheriff's departments, we have police departments, but you guys basically cover the whole country. And you also don't have things like DEA, FBI, you guys cover it all.
Yeah.
So give me a kind of a flavor of how you guys work.
Okay, so when you go into the Guards, you go in as a uniform Garda, and you do 2 years as a uniform Garda, performing all sorts of duties, going to calls and on the beat, and just developing and honing your skills. And then you're eligible to go forward for what we call specialised units. So you could have the Garda fraud unit, you could have the Garda drugs unit, you could go into community policing, you could maybe make a career from in the station and do your exam and qualify as a sergeant, because the rank structure are Garda to sergeant to inspector to superintendent to chief superintendent, and then assistant commissioner, deputy commissioner, and commissioner, and that's the rank structure. In tandem with that, then you have you can be appointed as a detective Garda while you're serving Garda. You then go for promotion, you're a sergeant, and you have to do your 2 years as a sergeant, and then you're eligible to go for detective sergeant. At that stage, then you can do your 2 years, maybe not 2 years, but thereabouts, but it usually takes a bit longer to do your inspector's exam. Then you qualify for inspector's exam, you do the exam, and you go forward for promotion. And if you're lucky, you become an inspector, and again, the same procedure. You have to do a year before you are appointed, if you go for it's a separate appointment as a detective inspector. And from that, then it's the same ordeal for the superintendents. Again, it's a written exam, then it's a series of interviews, but you can be appointed to detective superintendent from the inspector rank. And the same then for chief, again, is exam based and then interview based. And the assistant commissioner then is a series of interviews.
So before I get into detectives, for patrol, I'm just going to call it patrol, but for patrol officers or patrol Garda, what's the highest rank you can go to? Is it sergeant?
Well, yes, I suppose for patrols, and not the sergeant, the inspectors generally are they're in charge of the teams, whether teams of Gardaí, whether sergeants, whether teams of community police, teams of local crime task force, just teams, the order units and that. Yeah, so the inspectors, while they do go on patrol to make sure that the patrols aren't being carried and to do supervision duties and all the rest, I suppose yes, there's a lot of superintendents who would resent the fact that you don't go on patrol as superintendent if I say that, but because I know some of them do like to get out and about, but it's maybe they just don't have the time, because most of it is office and administration, and it's people sort of work that you have to do at that level.
Okay.
So I don't know if there's a cutoff on patrols, but if there was to be one, I would say it would stop at inspector. Yeah.
Okay. So for the Garda, in general, and I don't want to speak for everybody, but in general, is the goal to become a detective, or do some people just go, "Hey, I'm happy with what I'm doing, just policing, out in the field"?
Yeah, I know. Just before I left, I interviewed 100 exactly 100 people who wanted to be appointed as detectives. And they came from all walks of on Garda Síochána, whether it was traffic or community policing or drug units or crime task force units or whatever. And there were times when I just felt like proverbially putting my arm around the shoulder and say, look, it's not for you, you know. So the desire to become a detective, what informed that, you know, was it I want to get off the tree relief, or was it because I want to be a detective, or was it because for whatever reason? I won't say that everybody that joins the Guards wants to become a detective. There's a path, and that's the good thing about the Garda Síochána. There is a pathway for people to branch off on, whether it is community policing. And I suppose the one thing I would say before saying much more is that at the heart of the Garda Síochána is community policing, and we all of the guards are essentially community police, because you are interacting with the public and you should be putting the best foot forward, irregardless. So there would be a lot of my former colleagues who would look at me and say, "Oh, I didn't want to become. I wasn't all about becoming a detective for me." So I'm saying there's room for a lot of, like, some people want to go into the traffic unit. I would never have been a suitable candidate for the traffic unit. So when I say you honed your skills in the first 2 or 3 years, you know, you had to look at what was going on around you, and you were taking it all in. And I suppose after 2 or 3 years, and certainly 4 or 5 years, you certainly could look at what was happening around you, and you could make a choice. So I think I would actually shine in that area. I think I could develop my skills in that area. I think I would be interested in becoming a detective. I think I would become interested in becoming a traffic guard. I think I would be interested in becoming a community police guard. So I mean, I will concede that I think a lot of young people want to become detectives.
Okay. Okay. Well, let's focus in on you a little bit. So, as you were explaining, if you get to the detective unit, then they have the drug unit, the organized crime, I'm assuming homicide,
Yeah.
basically a whole bunch of different plethora of things. What did you go into?
Yeah, I very quickly wanted to drive patrol cars, for starters.
Okay.
So I, after 2 years service, I was lucky enough to become a patrol car driver. So that was, that meant that you were out in the thick of all the calls and all the action. You were responding to all sorts of calls.
Okay, so wait a minute. So explain this to me. So what you're saying, because again, I'm just trying to relate this to the United States. So most people are already in patrol cars when they start.
No.
So for Garda,
No.
it sounds like you guys are community policing, walking around within the community.
Yeah,
okay.
Out on the beat, walking around in the community, out in the towns, out
okay.
on the,
okay.
yeah, and generally what you had then was, maybe not so much now, because it's a different job nowadays, where you have rotation and all the rest. But then you had, the two senior men were the patrol car driver and the patrol car observer.
Okay.
So unless one of them were on holidays or whatever, you were out on the beat 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever beat it was, that you were out and about. And you know, when I look back on it, and you talk to business people and all the rest, they never really look for much from the guards, except for a Garda presence. And they certainly had it back in the 80s and the 90s when I was cutting my teeth. You know, that you are out and about, you are meeting the public, you are meeting the business people and that. And even as a detective inspector later in life, I took that with me, and I got involved in the Chamber of Commerce in Bray and in County Wicklow, and got to know all of the business, well, as many of the business people as I could, knowing that mostly what they wanted was a Garda presence, or to see the guards on the street, or to be able to ring the guards when there was an issue or whatever. That's basically, that was the do the small things right.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I started in Dundrum. I got into the patrol car 2 years, and then I transferred to a station called Cabinteely in County Dublin, Dublin 18. It was closer to where I lived, and I again was on the patrol car there, and I figured that I would like to get into the crime task force, and then I was invited by the detective sergeant from in Cabinteely in the detective unit to become an assistant. We used to call them buckshees, but to become an assistant to the detective unit in Cabinteely. So from that day on, I suppose while I wasn't what we call appointed as a detective, I was in plain clothes, I was carrying a firearm, and I was actively engaged in all types of crime.
Okay, so let me ask you some questions before we start talking about that position. When you say patrol car, I'm assuming based on what you're saying that a patrol car is answering all the calls.
All the calls.
Okay, so that's, I guess, a little bit more high speed than just kind of walking around on your beat.
Yeah.
Okay, that's interesting. Okay, so that when you go to basically, I'm going to call an apprentice detective. Would that be fair to say?
Yeah.
Okay, so in general, Ireland doesn't have any guns.
Mm.
Okay, so at what rank or what level do you get to carry a firearm in Ireland?
When I joined the detective unit, obviously one of the first things you do is go off on firearms training.
Okay.
You're then issued with a firearms license, firearms card.
Okay.
And that's authorized by your district officer, your superintendent. Then you're entitled to carry a firearm, and you basically go to the range a couple of times a year to keep the eye in and to make sure that you're competent in carrying a firearm and using it.
Okay. So as a detective, can you carry your firearm off duty?
No.
So do you leave it at the?
Yeah, you're issued with a locker, a gun press.
Okay.
For the thing.
Okay.
And bringing it home is never a good idea. I mean, if you have young kids and things like that at home and you don't have a gun press and that for it, it's never a good idea.
Do you have a problem in Ireland with bad guys with guns?
We do, yeah. We've had a number of, for want of a better word, assassinations on the street where we have criminals involved in the drug trade, and it's all about gang warfare. It's all about patch, who controls what patch or what turf. Turf wars, as you call them in America. And while thankfully it has been turned around, we had an extraordinary amount of shootings by criminals. And only as recently as last week, we had a number of firearms and a large quantity of drugs seized by Garda National Drugs and Organised Crime Bureau. And from time to time, that's still occurring.
Where are the guns coming from?
Yeah, the guns are coming ostensibly when these gangs purchase, they buy their drugs in wherever they buy them, and they generally come in with the consignment of drugs.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So when you became a detective, what kind of crimes were you first working on, and was there a goal? Did you have an idea of what kind of crimes you ultimately wanted to start investigating?
When I first of all became a detective, again I had some wonderful mentors, and I suppose I would always be in a rush out to arrest the bad guy, and one of my mentors would say, "Frank, slow down, let the water close in around him." Which is something I got to appreciate. Is a saying I got to appreciate, and say, figure out all the angles, ask all the questions first, and then. But I suppose what happened was I probably would have been reluctant to do the paperwork involved when I went in there first, because I would rather be out and about and that. But I started to realize that it was they went hand in hand. You had to have your reports right, you had to have your paperwork right, and I suppose at some stage I improved it to such an extent that somebody noticed it, and I became what they call a bookman. Nowadays they call them the incident room coordinator, IRC. But at that stage, what happened was somebody had to put the investigation together from start to finish. And as one of my mentors used to say to me, you start at the start and you finish at the finish. So I became kind of an apprentice to some of the most senior bookmen on Garda Síochána. So when any major crime would occur, like an abduction or a murder, I would go into the incident room, start off the book, as we call it, and this is the Garda system of investigating. You start at the start, and you go through all the numbers, and you make sure all the witness statements are recorded, and you make sure all the evidence observed, and it's all examined and forensically examined, and all the rest. So that's just basically the type of work that was involved. So I became involved in that type of work, and I suppose I spent a good 10 years doing that.
So when you say bookman, is that are you essentially overseeing that case file and saying, okay, we need to do this, we need to do this, we need to do this, and documenting everything?
Documenting everything.
Wow,
And you'd have a conference then every day or every week or whatever it is, and you'd have a job sheet there, and you'd allocate out all the jobs, and then you follow up with your team to see, was that job done, was this job done? Now, I wouldn't be doing it on my own. Obviously, there would be a detective superintendent, detective inspector, detective sergeant, but you know, you'd be a cog in the wheel there to make sure that all of this is completed satisfactorily.
Wow.
And I suppose it stood me in good stead, because at the end of my career, I was still fit to go into any of the incident rooms throughout the city where a major investigation would be taking place, and you know, have an appreciation and an understanding of how the Garda machine works and how the investigation team work, and how it's all built up, and you know, how you start on your report, how you present your report to the DPP, that's the Director of Public Prosecutions, and how you make a case for a criminal prosecution.
Yeah, so as a bookman, I'm assuming that's like a specialized position.
Yeah.
Okay. So after 10 years of doing that, did you retire from that, or did you move on to a different position?
I got promoted then to sergeant.
Okay. What unit?
Yeah, good question. So I was involved in an investigation as a bookman, and I had gone forward for promotion, and I got the promotion. And in those days we didn't have mobile phones, so I think the list was out for a couple of hours before I heard anything about it. So I was sent down to Limerick. I was posted to Limerick as a sergeant in a station, in charge of a unit of about 8 or 9 guards. But I was lucky because I had a colleague who was actually from North Kerry, which is bordering on the Limerick division. And I arranged a swap so that he came down and took over down in Limerick, and I went back up to Rathmines. So again, I was back up in Dublin. But actually, while I was in Limerick, I was away from the family, and that's quite a few 100 miles or more away from home. But there was, I think there was about 5 murder investigations going on at the time, and I know that there was one particular one just arose from an altercation where the victim was pushed and fell, and his head off the ground, and ultimately that was the cause of his death. And I was able to investigate that one on my own while I was there, because I had the experience to it, and they were overrun with the other 4 investigations that they had on hand. But I got back to Rathmines then, and I suppose in Rathmines I was involved in a case, a murder investigation that it had occurred in 1982, and the culprit had fled the country to South Africa, and he had been away for 10 years. But you know, while he was gone, it wasn't forgotten about. But when he came back, he was tried in the Central Criminal Court, and at the time it was the longest running murder trial in the history of the state. It has since been overtaken on at least 2 or 3 occasions. So I suppose that took up a lot of my time in Rathmines, and I just happened to be fortunate in that the chief superintendent for that division had been my district officer while I was doing the books in the Eastern Division. And I suppose he came in one night and he said to me, into Rathmines, "What are you doing here?" And I knew the question was, you know, why are you still here when you should be back in your own division and all the rest? And he says, "Apply and I'll send you back." And I thought, I'm forever grateful to him, because it was a very nice thing for him to do, because he knew that while I was there, I would work my socks off. But in fairness, he knew that I wanted to get back to my own division, and that's how that came about. And it was just karma. It was just a nice thing, you know, nice thing to happen.
So you went from Bookman to work at homicides. Did you say? I think you and I spoke with beforehand. Were you working drug cases?
Yeah, well, in the as a bookman, you would be working on all of the major investigations, and if you had a major drug seizure, then there would be quite a bit of investigation involved in that. The major drug seizures, though, tend to be very specialised in that the Garda National Drugs and Organised Crime Bureau, they tend to take over when it comes to the drugs, because there's a lot of intelligence in that to be managed there, and a lot of planning to be done. And while they might look for assistance and all the rest, they are the experts there when it comes to the major seizures of drugs. Okay. So when I'm talking about a bookman, you're talking about say kidnapping, you're talking about murder, robbery, all of the major the crimes that occur in every country.
Did you have did you have cases that you liked more than others?
No, it's difficult to answer that one. I kind of anticipated you would ask me that question. I suppose we had a couple of investigations that were kind of unique, and I remember going to a remote part of Wicklow, a town where a murder had taken place, and I recall one of my colleagues on the team asking me, "Where are we going to go here?" We hadn't got an idea, not a clue. And I don't know for what reason, but I just said to him, "Give it 2 or 3 days and the locals will point us in the right direction," because that sense of community in the town had been offended. It was a kind of you wouldn't get that in Dublin city centre, you wouldn't get it, you know, the major cities and all the rest. But I just made that call and right enough, you know, within a couple of days, we had the steer on who was leaving town, and we eventually arrested the culprit. I remember an attack on a very elderly lady, very, very vicious assault in her home in the middle of the night. And the guys on the team, again, it was in the Wicklow area, it was in Bray, the guys on the team, they were absolutely brilliant. They would have worked free of charge round the clock, and they left no stone unturned, and we had a successful conviction on that one as well. I can remember an 8-year-old child was murdered by his father. His throat was slit by his father, and the scene was horrific. And I remember saying to the guard at the door, "Lock that door, nobody gets in there except if the coroner or when they're taking the body away from the scene, but nobody should go in there." It was a horrific scene. And other scenes where a young man was killed in his home, and again and his girlfriend was almost she was attacked, and she was lucky to escape with her life. His brother was attacked; he escaped with his life as well. I don't particularly like talking about them because you develop a relationship with their siblings or parents or their whoever you're dealing with at the time, so you don't particularly want to bring that back to their memory either. So again, it was a horrific scene. And I suppose the last major one I was investigating was where a woman was waiting at a bus stop, got on the bus and went to a small town in Wicklow on the bus, and she was followed, and she was abducted in a car and taken up the mountains, and there she was murdered, and it took us maybe 2 days to find her body, but we did find it. And again, there was a mystery as to, we had everybody lined up to find it, the army and my own team to find this body, and just a cursory search of a huge area. One of my colleagues found a purse, so we had an idea that it was somewhere in that area. Still, there was a lot of gorse and all the rest, and I remember the teams all lined up and ready to go. One of the guys kind of, not broke rank, but he saw something out of place ahead of him in the gorse. And he went over and he moved an obstacle and he walked down. And, he said to me, I'm going to go down there and have a look. I'd say, hang on, we get some mountain gear or whatever to tie a rope around you or whatever, just for health and safety. And down he went, and he discovered her body, and we could have been looking for days, but he found it so quickly, And I just think there's some sort of spirituality or something involved in that.
When you look back on your career, though, were there specific cases? Did you like to investigate specific cases more than others? Like, for example, in the United States, I talk to a lot of officers who hate working anything regarding a child. Did you have cases that you didn't like to work versus cases that you did like to work?
No. My sense of justice when something goes wrong, something is wrong, or somebody's done something they shouldn't do, it doesn't. I'm not. There's not one case I like over another. I mean, they're all challenges, and I always say the finish line. I don't particularly. The glass is always half full or refillable. I never sort of despair about it or say, no, I'm not involved. I'm not getting involved with this.
How's the Irish culture? How are the people? How do they look at the Garda? Is it favorably? Has it changed over time? Give me an idea.
Yeah, I suppose I always took heart and was huge consolation from the fact that we had an 80% plus, 88% plus approval rating among the public, certainly when I was serving in Garda Síochána. I'm not sure what the figures are nowadays. I would imagine maybe not that high, and I suppose I can attribute that to globalization. Maybe we're following the American culture, the English culture. We can see all of these riots and that taking place in London and Paris, and the yellow vests have arrived, and all of these other left-wing and right-wing groups have arrived. And before, when they made a complaint about the Garda, it was investigated and that. But nowadays it's so disheartening, because that Garda's career is on hold while that complaint has been investigated. And we recently had a case where a Garda in COVID times gave a bicycle to a member of the community, an elderly member of the community, who had a problem with his knees. I mightn't be entirely correct with the problem he had, but he had ordered a bicycle, and with COVID, it wasn't arriving, and the Garda gave him a lend of a bicycle that was unclaimed at the back of the station. And he has spent a considerable amount of time suspended while this was being investigated. This was a bicycle that was being investigated over 3 or 4 years, that for the life of me, I can't understand why it took so long to investigate. I just don't understand why it took so long to investigate, and I can't answer why. But you can imagine in a community in Ireland where the Garda is, at the centre of the community, and I would imagine, he's thinking that there's a lot of people in the community saying, "Oh, there's no smoke without fire, and why is he suspended? And I notice he's not going to work in the mornings or whatever." It can be a small enough community at times. So we have that sort of culture creeping in where we have a lot more complaints made about in Garda Síochána. And I'm not saying the guards get it right all the time either.
Yeah.
But that's the way things are going.
But prior to this kind of change that you're mentioning, I've got to imagine, you correct me if I'm wrong, I've got to imagine that the reason why the Garda reputation was so high or provability was so high is you guys are doing community policing. You are in the community all the time.
Absolutely, yeah. And when the guards call to your door or when the guards meet you on the street or whatever, it's not that they're armed and straight away there's a conflict or confrontation.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of the Garda training is community orientated. You're even down to how you stop a car. That stop the car, say just an ordinary checkpoint here. Good day, how are you? Just engage with them, with the public. And I had an old inspector at one stage, and he always said to me, "Son, do them with a smile," So, I always thought that was a very that was a good psychology. It's not personal. It's somebody has minor breaches of the law for traffic infringement or whatever. It's not the end of the world.
Mm-hmm.
You can talk about it if somebody has a really good excuse or whatever. Although those days are fast disappearing. Usually you let the judge decide.
Okay.
We used to have discretion, but I'm not so sure that it's so prevalent nowadays.
Oh, that's interesting.
Mm.
So let me ask you this, because we started a little bit backwards from how I normally start, but I'm very curious. This is one of the primary reasons I wanted to chat with you. Give me a little bit of background about you growing up, where you grew up, your family, and was there something that drew you to law enforcement?
I grew up born in Dublin. I grew up in the 60s. We lived in Dublin for a while, and then we moved to Longford in the country. We moved to Cork for a spell, and then we moved back up to Dublin. I was the oldest of the family, and I suppose my father had friends who are members of Garda Síochána, and I suppose back in the 70s and 80s, there was a huge respect for members of Garda Síochána. I mean, I certainly had as a kid, and I never fell foul of the guards, but I always had a huge respect for the guards. And I suppose I hadn't really always thought I was going to be a guard, and indeed, my first job was in retail with a major retail outlet in this country, back in the 80s. And then the advertisement for Garda Síochána came up, and I remember my father drawing my attention to it. And I was looking at it, and I thought, do you know something? I might just give that I'll give it a try, And I remember my general manager in retail said to me, "Look," he says, "we're sorry to lose you, and if it doesn't work out, you can always come back here." And I that was a really key piece of the jigsaw puzzle for me, that if it didn't work out, I could come back. And I often wonder when I was down in Templemore why I didn't go back, because it was a very tough regime. But when the going gets tough, the tough get going. So I did the 6 months there, and then I, as I say, I was sent to Dundrum, and I have absolutely enjoyed every minute of my career, and I've been very fortunate to have been promoted to the regional detective superintendent's position you know, to top my career. Yeah.
So when your dad basically brought your attention to this
Hmm.
advertisement to be a Garda, was there something particular that you went, oh, that's really interesting? You know, I've always been interested in doing that, or was it just, let's just give it a whirl, see how this turns out?
Well, I've always had a very strong sense of justice, a very strong sense of right and wrong. And my mother, Lord rest her, would say that about me as well. So I think it just appealed to me straight away, you know, that I could make a difference. You know, I wasn't about to change the world, but I reckoned, you know, this would suit me, that I could actually make a difference.
So when you started, I'm assuming it was like, yeah, this is for me. I have
Yeah,
that sense of justice, and
yeah,
okay,
yeah.
okay. So you had mentioned that at least for a little while you were away from your family. You know, a
Hmm.
couple 100 miles or
Yeah.
100 miles. How did being in law enforcement over your career, did it affect your family?
Oh yeah, I'd have to say yes. You know, if you're in the middle of investigations, you're always the first man in the morning, and you're the last to leave in the evening. And even if I think about the last case I was involved in, where, you know, I was hoping that we'd find that girl's body in the bushes, in the gorse, and that I had asked our air support unit to go to do a flyby and to turn on the heat seekers to see heat seeking apparatus, you know, to see if we could pick up a body in the middle of this vast. And I remember at 12 o'clock at night on the phone to them and saying, yeah, there's deer and there's fox and everything here. We just don't know what we're you know, there's so many different, so it's impossible. But you know, when you were stuck in an investigation and there's communions and confirmations and all the rest came along, and you know, those timelines there. God, guys, I have to be gone here by 11 o'clock or half 11, and then suddenly you're arriving late, or maybe there's birthday parties that you've missed. But you consoled yourself. I consoled myself and look, you know, you get the sense where you can't be done without.
Mm-hmm.
And of course you can be done without, but while you're that soldier, while you're in the middle of it, while you think you know so much about it, and while you think you have so much of an influence on the team and all the rest, you know, that's what you do.
Yeah. I'm interested how being a police officer in Ireland is different than being a police officer in the United States, with respect that in the United States we have a high divorce rate and alcoholism, stuff like that. Do you have that same issue here in Ireland?
Yeah, well, divorce is not unusual. I suppose before the introduction of the welfare system, which is really, really good now, when we would go to a horrendous scene, or at the end of an investigation or whatever, we just go and have a few pints, and then we never talk about it again.
Mm-hmm.
Have I seen alcoholism on Garda Síochána? Yes, but not prevalent. Not that I can't even think of any one or two names. That's about it.
Mm-hmm.
Divorce, I suppose it's happening in all walks of life. I just don't know what the figures are.
Okay.
I do see a trend where our young people are maybe not prepared to give their time. Their time is more valuable nowadays, and the jury's out with me on that.
Okay. Okay. How about when you look back on your career? How long did you spend in law enforcement?
40 years.
Okay, so 40 years. Can you look back from when you started as a young man till now? Did being in law enforcement affect the way that you see people?
Oh yeah.
In what way?
I try and not be judgmental. I generally, first impressions make a big difference with me, and I kind of don't hide it if I meet somebody and Rarely, but if I meet somebody and you know, they don't impress me, for some reason or another, I can't put my finger on it. I don't, I'm not as charismatic as I should be. I'm kind of, what you see is what you get. I suppose being in law enforcement sort of toughens up your character and sort of...
Are you a little bit more jaded, a little bit more guarded with people that you don't know?
Yeah.
And you think that's the reason?
Probably, yeah. Probably, yeah. But I'm generally fairly good with people. I think I have good people skills.
Mm-hmm.
It's just, I don't know, you meet people that occasionally, and I know my wife, you know, has pulled me up on it a few times, where she'd say, God, you didn't hide the fact that you didn't like that person. But then a couple of times she'd come back to me and said, you know something, I know now why you didn't, he or she is not a nice person. So I'm not, I don't make perfect judgment calls, but I can live with the judgment calls that I make.
Okay. How does Garda work? So you work some homicides, and I'm assuming you work probably some traumatic events along the way. How does Garda work for providing you with officers with like mental health? Is it counseling? How does it work over here?
I'm only going to tell you one experience, because what I'm going to say is that the welfare system that on Garda Síochána now is second to none. It really is, and they're trained welfare officers and all the rest, and they're brilliant. But I think when I was growing up in the Garda Síochána, what I said to you was, and I didn't drink until I was about 35 years of age. But when you're with the team and all the rest, and it's a trust and bonding issue and all the rest, so you have a few pints with the team and you don't talk about it the next day when you come in, that's it. That's over, done and dusted. That's the counselling session, done. I suppose one of the major crime scenes that I went to, where it was like a Quentin Tarantino scene with blood everywhere. And I remember going in early, and all of the young people, the Gardaí, the men and women that had been at the scene, I remember bringing them into the canteen and sitting them all down and insisting that none of them left to go home until they downloaded their notebooks. But while I called for the welfare people to come in and talk to them all to make sure that they were all okay, because some of them would have to drive certain distances home. And, you know, when you're alone in your car and all of this is going through your mind and going through your head. So I just wanted to make sure that the welfare system was there for them. And I remember the welfare guy came in and, you know, like I'm talking to you now, I say, hi, how are you? We know each other. And the thing he said has stayed with me. He says, now when the management leave the room, he says, we'll start talking about it, right? Now, I had been up there at the scene and that as well, okay? And I almost said, what about me? You know, I absolutely acknowledged that I didn't need it. And I absolutely acknowledged that he was right in what he was saying. But I was just thinking, he should have said to me, by the way, there's my card, give me a shout if you're whatever, you know. In my day, it was kind of, I suppose, you think you were showing signs of weakness if you, and I know one of my, well, I won't say mentors, but he was a year or two ahead of me. When he'd called to a scene of a traffic accident, somebody was dead or whatever, he'd just physically get sick. He just wasn't able to. As soon as he see blood, he was out. And we didn't, when I think about it, pass much remarks on it. We just said, well, if there's a traffic, if there says we'll go and you do something else or whatever. So there was never a kind of a culture where you were accused of not being able to or whatever it is. But we grew up in Ireland in the 60s, 70s and 80s, and we didn't ask for help, you know.
Well, it's interesting because I didn't even realize until about 5 minutes ago as you were talking, you're mentioning welfare, but welfare
when you initially brought it up, meant something totally different.
Yeah.
You're referring to what we would refer to, I guess, as employee assistance program. Well, these are the guys that come in to talk with you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Exactly.
just for the audience, a little bit of clarification.
Yeah, sorry, my mistake there. Yeah, it's
no, I mean,
yeah.
it's not on your fault. It's my fault. Just
Yeah.
It's like it's like me yesterday talking to somebody, and they referred to a jumper, and I had no idea what a jumper was, and then they told me it was a sweater. So okay.
Yeah.
Do you have any advice if somebody's watching this and is interested in going into Garda? Do you have any advice for a younger person that would be thinking about it?
Yeah, I do. If they decide that that's what they want to do, I would say don't pigeonhole yourself or make up your mind, say, I want to be a detective, I want to be a community guard, I want to be. I would say to go in and to learn the trade, learn the profession, have a look at what's going on around, and see if you make a decision at 2 years, 3 years, you could be lucky and it could be the right decision, but don't be in a hurry. I mean, if you have 30 years ahead of you in a particular role as in Garda Síochána, which which ideally you have, just get to know the job, and then make an informed decision about where you want to go after that. And the second thing is, you probably should talk to people who are, shall we say, senior, and maybe retired, maybe not, but who are happy in their role, and not somebody who's disgruntled and turn you off every, whatever path you want to go down, because they had tried and they weren't successful, and they beat you down and say, oh, what do you want to do that for? You'll only get... So you need to pick out good mentors, and don't be afraid to ask for advice.
Okay. Frank, thank you very much for the interview. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome.